Tucker Carlson's back on it again in terms of the vaccine. Still talking about VAERS. And, I mean, it's important to play. I mean, Tucker is, what's fascinating about Tucker Carlson is he really, the amount of lack of caring about his audience and their health and their well-being is pretty stunning. He is willing to sacrifice some of members of his audience and obviously some percentage of the American population because he knows it's good for ratings. He's attracting a whole subset of not necessarily exclusively on the right of anti-vaxxers and conspiracy mongers. And here's how he's doing it, right? Like VAERS, we know what this system is. It is basically open to anyone. If you have any reason to suspect, and people, or no reason to suspect, other than like some type of temporal proximity, that you have had an adverse reaction to a vaccine, you put it into this system. And then the system, they check these. That's the process. Here he is making it seem like there's something very nefarious going on.
So the government keeps a database and has for decades on vaccine harm. It's called the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting Database, VAERS, and it tracks the side effects of vaccines, and there are side effects to all medicines.
Pause it for 1 second. Just to be clear again, this is not a database of vaccine reactions. It is a database. It is a system for people at large to report what they think might be a reaction.
And there's no process to determine if someone's like triple, quadruple submitting, if it's, some
right.
sort of coordinated effort.
We're not examining these. This is completely raw data that has not been assessed or analyzed or validated. It's not tracking anything. It is like any more than like a suggestion box is,
or a subreddit.
Right. But here it is. But it's good that we have a mechanism like this because you want to make sure that anybody can report and don't need to do it through their doctor or whatnot. But then it needs to be checked. But then there's also the problem that people can sort of.
But who's doing the checking? Is it Fauci?
We don't know.
Yeah.
We can't possibly know.
Exactly.
And it tracks the side effects of vaccines, and there are side effects to all medicines. You're not allowed to read it, though, and if you do, people attack you. So we ignore it. That's why today almost no one noticed when the CDC updated the VAERS database. But we did notice it, thanks to Alex Berenson. Our Matt Finn is tracking what exactly those numbers are right now. Hey, Matt.
Tucker, the CDC's website posts an active tally of death reports being reviewed as potentially linked to a COVID vaccine. It's called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS. That tally sat around 6,000, then suddenly spiked to 12,000, and now fell back down to 6,000. A short while ago, the CDC told us the drastic fluctuation was an honest mistake. The domestic death report tally was temporarily combined with the international number, and that has since been corrected. This evening, the CDC tells Fox News the current confirmed number of deaths being reviewed as possibly linked to a COVID vaccine is 6,207. That means 6,000 reports have been submitted to be probed for a link to a vaccine. The CDC tells us that many of those 6,000 reports have already been reviewed and determined not to be caused by a vaccine. In fact, the CDC insists that so far it has only independently confirmed 3 total deaths were linked to a vaccine. They say all 3 of those came from the Johnson & Johnson shot. Tucker.
Matt Finn, thanks so much. Good to see you tonight. So the question is not what the number is. We can debate that. The question is, are we as a country or the federal agencies, and is the news media making a good faith effort to find out what it is and then to care about what it is? Why wouldn't we care? If there were claims that Tylenol was causing people harm, we'd look into it. But news organizations aren't looking into it because there's an enormous amount of pressure just to ignore it. We're not following along, of course. Everyone else is.
But they're not looking into it. Well, how are they looking into it? The
Well,
only
they
thing
had
that
a
they're reporting
reporter
is that there
come.
was a flaw. I mean, like, they're
Yeah.
not looking into it any more than do we just look into it?
No, they had
idea
the
that this-
reporter say that, and then Tucker goes, huh, but we're looking into it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it really is reprehensible. And of course, I don't buy the fact that the government is looking into it, that they've actually investigated these. And the implication is like what? Like that 6,000 people rushed overnight to report these things, and then the CDC like dropped it down, or is it they're like there's so many that's constantly going that the CDC is always throwing out these extra people. It is
If the government is so invested in covering this up, why does VAERS exist? If they're not looking into it, why don't they take
controlled
down
opposition.
Oh, right.
So you think that they're reporting it, but they're really not reporting it. And of course, at Fox News, they can't. They're not part of the media. We can't know. No one's told us.
They're certainly not part of the corporate media.
No, it's not like they have millions of dollars of resources to look into something like this.
Not like they're owned by News Corp.
It really is amazing.
Mm.
There's both mysterious things going on, but we don't have a way of finding out.
I mean, that's good enough for their purposes. There's mysterious things going on. Be scared of them and confused and not quite sure what to do. Yep, stay tuned.
And the weird part is that if you ask Tucker if he's been vaxxed, it's like asking him, according to his exchanges he had with reporters, it's like asking him what's his favorite sex position and when was the last time he engaged in it. But at the same time, you can also look into whether people died. So it's like, I mean, is the idea that people have been vaxxed, is that like to ask them, particularly if they're in a position of like all this vax skepticism? That's offensive. But when you look into whether people died, that's fine. In fact, it's crazy that it's not happening more at news outlets, except for, of course, the news outlet that he's at. He understands why it's not happening there. It really is impressive what he gets away with, at least over there. We'll see. This stuff with Cuba is sort of stunningly crowding out what's happening in Colombia and what's happening in Haiti, right? I mean, just on a pure news worthiness function, those stories you would imagine would get more attention.
Well, you would. I wouldn't imagine in that, you know, it doesn't need to be this grand conspiracy that, you know, the powers that be at these newspapers are telling you top down, focus more on Cuba, but just that's the kinds of people that are hired at certain institutions, and that's what they deem more newsworthy because that's what they see as threatening to U.S. hegemony.
Right. And we're also, you know, seeing the administration make more of a point on some of these other, you know, they could be speaking out more about what's happening in Colombia. But
yeah, but that was badass by his name's Mick Wallace, Irish member of the European Parliament. So that's pretty cool.
I mean, on the topic of Cuba particularly, just getting outside of an American frame of reference really opens up a lot of details about that whole situation.
Similarly to getting outside of like U.S. frame of reference when it comes to Israel, which is helpful too.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.